We begin this podcast in memory of those that we have lost. The first thing that we have lost, Tim, what is it?
Affirmative action.
And then along the way, we also lost the rights for women and their body autonomy. And then came the death of the United States, with the president being given the powers to be a king.
This is all very dramatic.
In memory of the United States of America.
I have one more candle that I'm going to light.
Oh, what's this one for, Tim?
I don't know.
What's coming next?
Oh, for gay rights.
Don't be trans. Don't change your gender.
Don't do any of that.
You know, it's another we got to light. Let's go, Brandon.
Oh, yeah, that's right. All those flags and shirts. They're going to wind up in Africa somewhere.
Do you hear that sound? It's the sound of hundreds of scraping sounds of people with their F-150s, those Ford trucks scraping those.
They got to scrape
bumper
the
stickers.
Let's Go Brandons off of them. That's sad. They can keep them. I like them.
In case you haven't noticed, this episode's about the Supreme Court, the Imperial Court, the Rogue Court of the United States.
Right, the broken system. Well, the stacked system. It's working the way it was intended, kind of. But damage is being done.
And on this podcast, we talk about what we think can fix this court reform. Tim has a different opinion than me. Find out.
Mine has less bloodshed.
Stacking the court is not bloodshed.
It could lead to bloodshed.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, here we go.
What the hell's going on?
It's a good question.
I'm glad I'm Italian. I'm not white.
You kind of are.
Why does it have to be the big chicken?
Why does it have to be the big chicken?
Why do you have to say it like that? I was right, and you were racist.
It's Britney, bitch.
I still have a belief that Sasquatch is out there, but that doesn't make me crazy. And you give me that face, and this is my issue. You're a questionable person.
This is a podcast where Rick, a Generation Xer, and Tim, a millennial, come together and try to find answers to our changing world.
Break it down with Rick and Tim. All right.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Rick.
In the last episode of our podcast, we talked about ghosts.
Ooh, scary.
And the paranormal activity that's been happening here at my home.
Anything new?
No, because I've kept this bedroom door open.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Learned to get along. You didn't agitate the spirit.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Speaking of ghosts, the Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's... our old Supreme Court is now a ghost. This new rogue Imperial Trump Court is something else.
It is something else, and it is... there's a lot of damage that's being done.
The ghost of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I wonder what she's thinking right now.
Oh, well, maybe I should be thinking I should have retired.
Do you think she's got regrets?
I think that might be a regret of not retiring.
Do you think enough time has passed where we can acknowledge that Ruth Bader Ginsburg kind of dropped the ball? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, civil rights hero. We love her. We all love Ruth Bader Ginsburg. But right at the end there, just kind of dropped the ball a little bit. I'll take you back. It was the 2016 election. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was 83 years old. And that documentary came out about her that summer. We're all charged up. Remember, we were like, RBG, RBG, RBG. And then she was like, one more term. We're like, wait, one more term. 83 years old. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the blackjack table. And we were all like, RBG. And she got Delta 19. And we were like, RBG, RBG. She's like, hit me. I'm like, no, you were crushing it. We had it. Wasted now. All of it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing: what if you don't understand what's going on? So, quick history lesson. Like when people think of like who holds the power in the United States, you think of the President of the United States. Well, that's one of three powerful branches, right? Yes, has most of the power, but that power is kept in check by the other two branches. That would be the Congress and then the courts.
There's the executive branch, the president.
Right. And
The
so
legislative branch, Congress.
Right.
And then the judicial branch, the Supreme
Right.
Court.
Right. And the Congress, they control like the money, right? And then the courts control the laws, right? Whether or not you're abiding by the law or not. And so now the Supreme Court is basically going around saying, here's the law that we're going to make sure that you're following instead of hearing challenges.
Yes.
They're imposing their power instead of allowing it to be tapped, if that makes sense.
And before we jump into this topic, this is going to be the lasting legacy of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
By stacking the court.
Very much so.
So my name is Rick.
My name is Tim.
And this is
Break It Down
with
Rick and Tim.
Hey,
Hey.
season 2.
We're back, baby. And oh boy, did we miss some things, and things missed some people. One particular person in particular.
What?
Bullets.
Who?
That just went right by your head there, didn't you? Nick you in the ear?
What?
That joke?
What are you talking about?
Oh my God.
What do you?
You don't get anything I say.
I'm not picking up what you're putting down. This time I'm looking right
I
at
would
you.
say that I know. But what I was the whole joke was that Donald Trump got shot at. And It wasn't really that funny.
Well, the only thing I have to say about that is
Pop these Pepsis.
Say Joda.
Oh God. So this is where we disagree.
it's a joke.
I know it is.
I
But
kid. I want nothing to happen to that orange turd except get flushed. So the first red flag with our rogue imperial court.
okay, let's talk about this. So what is a
Was-
rogue imperial court? Let's talk about this.
A court that's been stacked.
A court that's been stacked.
Yes,
Okay.
with an agenda.
Okay.
Christian nationalist agenda.
Okay.
Yes, that's a rogue. It's not
Sure.
unbiased. It's not balanced.
Right.
The first red flag was Laurie Smith,
Okay.
the graphic designer in Colorado, who brought a hypothetical, and they made a decision on a hypothetical.
So not only that, did they not just make a hypothetical? They fast tracked it. Now we're covering a lot of things here,
But that was the first red
we
flag
need to-
for me.
Right. So what was that?
She was worried a homosexual couple was going to ask her to design wedding invitations.
Who was she?
Laurie Smith,
What was she?
graphic designer
There we go.
from Colorado.
Okay.
A good Christian woman.
Okay. So and she brought to the courts a hypothetical, right? And which means that at the end of this decision, there's no damages being done. It's just, here is what we want. I want you to set a precedent in the courts so that if somebody comes to me and says, hey, make our wedding invitations for our marriage and we're gay, I can say no. I want you to set that up so that I'm prepared for it. Is basically what's happening. And so, and the difference is, before that, because this is not the first situation where a gay couple has been discriminated against. And do you remember which one that was?
No.
We talked about it earlier today.
Was that the wedding cake?
Yeah, wedding
Okay.
cake one.
The Supreme Court has ruled in favor of a Colorado baker who didn't want to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. Masterpiece Cake Shop versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission is not a simple case pitting religious freedom against gay rights. It's much bigger than that. It's about what religious belief is and who should be deciding what beliefs are permissible in the public sphere.
The other cases, there were some cases before this one that had to do with discrimination, and they were brought to the courts, but they had an actual, like, tangible case where a couple was trying to get something, and they're suing because this company or this cake company refused, and that's fine, I suppose. But at the same, but what sets it apart again is that it's not a hypothetical. There's an actual, like, there are damages done. Somebody's going to lose this case. Either somebody's not going to be happy with the outcome. Somebody's not going to be getting what they want.
Well, Justice Sotomayor said that we're now discriminating Americans that are a protected class.
Was that on this case or was that on the most recent one?
It was the Laurie Smith one.
The Laurie Smith one. Okay.
When the Rogue Court, my opinion, Rogue Court, ruled for a Colorado Christian graphic designer, Laurie Smith, who didn't want to work with gay couples, it was all based on, like you said, a hypothetical. But what if a gay couple wanted me to design their wedding invitations? What if black people came in and ate in my restaurant?
Is that what
what
black
if?
people?
What if? That's me.
That's you.
That's my, oh my God, I don't. Okay. What if I have a gay establishment? I don't want you heterosexuals coming in here.
Remember, the difference being is that you are choosing not to take part in the process, the civil union, right? And that's what they are saying. They're not saying that they're discriminating based on the fact that they're gay. They're discriminating based on the fact that they're taking part in the process, the ceremony of it.
But it's still a business. She would have been paid if it was a real claim.
This is true.
Here's what Justice Sotomayor said. Today, the court, for the first time in its history, grants a business open to the public a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class. The decision is a win for religious rights and one in a series of cases in recent years in which the justices have sided with religious plaintiffs. Me, Rick, what I don't like with this Christian Nazi nationalism that's taking over is that these religious organizations are not paying taxes, yet they are influencing our laws and government.
That was an epic mic drop.
That's true. That is, and that's the other thing that's also true. Like from the beginning of it, like I went to Catholic churches growing up, and they were very political. Mm-hmm. Like all the time, the priest was talking, and I think that they shouldn't be exempt from taxes. They should have to pay taxes. It might not be the same. And again, a new type of tax bracket. We're not charging them like a business, I guess. But
here's the thing. I mean, church is a business. It's all about money.
It really is.
It really is. Whatever happened to the separation of church and state? Lip service? It's scary. Just a note for people that are listening and watching this, we will address Project 2025 in a couple episodes from now.
Oh, boy.
But this leads into that. This religious extremism that's taking over our country.
Right.
They're opportunists. They're seeing this opportunity with Trump.
Of course. Well, and because he's willing to push the craziest agenda because he's not afraid to say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah. They're using him. He's using them as parasitic, and it's symbiont. Mm. So that was the first red flag.
That was the first red flag, was this idea that you can bring a hypothetical case to the Supreme Court and have them set a precedent when there is no real defendant other than just the idea of a defendant.
When I was born, the color line in America wasn't just a fact of life. It was the law of the land. But by the time I was old enough to go to college, Black students had begun to integrate the nation's historically white colleges and universities in significant numbers for the very first time. The key to our rise was affirmative action.
Affirmative action seeks to reverse historical trends of discrimination against individuals with certain identities, and the Supreme Court last year ended that.
Right.
And my first red flag was yesterday, what I told you was the graphic designer, Laurie Smith, and Colorado. That was the first for me, but also was ending affirmative action.
Right. So for a quick recap on what affirmative action was, it was basically allowing universities to... They'll say give preferential treatment, but what it was it allows universities to take into account racial backgrounds. And one of the reasons why, again, as we've talked about in our previous podcasts, is that there is discrimination systematically built within our education system. It's broken. And for a quick recap on that, just basically what that means was... if you have a school, right, two kids going through two different schools at the same time, one kid is going to get a better funded school than the other kid, depending on where they live. And let's say they both have the same IQ and one kid falls below the 50 percentile in his class, in the rich kid class, he's going to get services. But the kid with the same scores is going to be in the top 50% in his class because the rest of the kids in his class are all below. He's not going to get the help that he needs. So it's really difficult. You have to be really low to get the support in the...
Yeah.
And so the problem is that a lot of our communities of color come up with that kind of education, and by the time they get to colleges, the ones that have grown up in a difficult socioeconomic community or situation aren't able or didn't have the same supports as the other kids. So it's not very fair in terms of how our education system prepared our students for college. So it allowed colleges to say, okay, we can take that into account. But a group of Asian students, I believe it's sued Harvard over or some Ivy League school over discrimination because they said they were discriminated against because they were students of color were given preferential treatment over them.
It's tough to get into Harvard. Fewer than 5% of students who apply are successful. That is, unless the applicant is Asian American. Then it's even harder, according to a lawsuit which accuses Harvard intentionally discriminates against Asian Americans in order to keep their enrollment numbers down.
Here is a video clip of Joy Ann Reid talking about how affirmative action helped her.
Yeah.
Well, let me just be clear. I got into Harvard only because of affirmative action. I went to a school no one had ever heard of in Denver, Colorado, in a small suburb. I didn't go to Exeter or Andover. I didn't have college test prep. I just happened to be really nerdy and smart and have really good grades and good SAT scores. Right. But someone came to Denver, Colorado to look for me. A Harvard recruiter flew to Denver, and I met up with her at the Village Inn restaurant and did a pre-interview to get to pull me into Harvard. I was pulled in, and the schools like Harvard and Yale that I got into affirmatively. Yes. And it was literally not saying we're going to take an unqualified person and put them in Harvard. Yes. We're going to take a very qualified person who we would never know existed and put them in Harvard. That's how I got there. That's how Ketanji got there. That's how Justice Jackson, I should say. Justice Jackson got there. It's how Clarence Thomas got there. Right. But the minute I arrived from my majority black little town, Montbello in Denver, to Harvard, the first week or two that I was in class, my presence was questioned by white people. I was in this big conference class where some white students stood up and said, those students, the black students, they're only here because of affirmative action. It became a huge argument that we all ended up having. This was freshman year. I had never had my academic credentials questioned. I had never had anyone question whether I was intelligent until I got to Harvard. And it was a defining point of my experience there. It's why I really was one of the many reasons I was miserable there my freshman year. Yeah. You felt completely out of place and people keep telling you shouldn't be here. And yet, some of the people I went to school with were far less smart than me or the other black folk there. They got in because their daddy and their granddaddy. I went to school with somebody whose name was on one of the buildings. You're going to school with people whose names are on the buildings, who are third and fourth generation legacies, whose parents pumped money into Harvard to get them in. But that affirmative action is okay with this majority. They said that the people who benefited from slavery, their descendants, who are so far ahead of black folk in terms of opportunity that we'll never catch up to them. I don't care how many Oprahs we get. Those people's affirmative action is A-okay because those people can pay for fancy trips for them. Yeah. But you people who want to get in just because of your brains, but you're not from a legacy, too bad. You can't come in.
It's ironic that Justice Clarence Thomas voted against it, yet he was a benefactor of affirmative action.
Right. But all of his friends don't want it. He benefited from it, but again, remember his. You have to look at what look at things from his perspective, right? Clarence Thomas is how much does a Supreme Court justice make?
$270,000 a year.
Right, so it's not that much to live the lifestyle that Clarence Thomas wants to live. So if he wants to live the yacht lifestyle,
Well, he has to write a book. That's where they make their money.
Well, sure, that too. But he has to try to He's a capitalist at this point, and that's an appropriate view in the United States.
And his wife, she's a cow. She eats a lot, so he has to buy a lot of food.
That's awful.
It's the truth. Sorry, Jenny. Truth hurts,
geez.
girl.
Oh, wow.
What the Supreme Court did by ending affirmative action was allowing universities to pick and choose.
Well, what it allowed universities to do was to say, we're not going to look at race. We're going to look completely at merit.
Okay, in an ideal world, that's great.
Right.
But the United States right now, in its current political climate, is not ideal.
Well, and looking at, going back to what I said before, it doesn't even matter about the politics of it. It's about the systemic fairness of it.
Yes.
So, politics be damned. It's about doing what's right for the community and the communities that exist. Because at the end of the day, like, especially our communities of color, they were thriving at one point, and it was a lot of just racism that brought them down. It's the truth. And, people don't like to say the quiet part out loud, but those systems still exist. And part of one of those systems is our education system, where it's built for, to benefit communities of affluence and to basically make it real difficult to get an education in a needy community. That's not the right way to say it. A community at risk, a underserved community.
Do you think we still need to have affirmative action?
Words. I think, well, yeah, because at the end of the day, I say that a lot at the end of the day. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, people are still black and there's still racists out there.
Well, and that's the thing. The system is still set up the way it is. We haven't, unless we change our education system and put more resources towards those communities that need those resources, right. We got to do something else.
Yeah. This past year, I worked at a Title I school.
Yeah, welcome.
Yeah, I got to see it firsthand.
It's rough.
Yeah.
It's really bad. In Oregon, we're terrible in education. But, that doesn't mean we're not making progress.
Okay. Did this happen before the graphic designer? Which one happened? Which came first? Let's find out.
Yeah, it was probably in the same session where the Supreme Court makes their rulings and then puts it. And that, I think I remember that too, because it was like two blows. You're like, what and what? And then, yeah. And it was kind of a double whammy. And that's when, we kind of realized the Supreme Court is ready to take away, because here's the reality of it. You've got Republican states and Democratic states, and they have the federal government kind of holding us together like a glue, right? Here are some things that are good for society. Affirmative action is good for society. And yeah, you're going to say most of the progressive states support that, and a lot of conservative states don't really like it, right? So what we're doing now is slowly dismantling all these social, constructs that we've created that have kind of held the fabric of the Republican and Democrats together. And they're allowing now a separation. So when I talk about that slowly defiant of the Supreme Court, right now the Supreme Court is stripping away the federal protections that the courts have given to the citizens of the United States. And they're saying, well, we're going to let states decide what those protections are. And if you're a woman, you don't really. Well, let's back up there. If you're a baby, a fetus, you get protections. Now, those protections trump your mother and the health of your mother. Because the reason I say that is because they'll say, well, when the life of the mother is at risk. Well, how do you determine when the life of the mother is at risk? When you have a pregnancy that is at risk of a mother getting sick or dying, when do you get to say, hey, we're going to stop this pregnancy because it's dangerous? And there are doctors out there already who are saying, well, I don't want to go near that territory, so I'm just not going to help you out here. Enjoy your flight to a blue state.
Tears streaming down your face. What does this mean to you today?
It feels like a betrayal. It feels like my country doesn't love me and appreciate my body as a woman. I can't even chant because I can't say anything. It hurts.
And then the even bigger thing that came down was Dobbs, when they reversed Roe versus Wade.
That is insane.
And we've talked about that tremendously in depth on our podcast.
We have. And this is what Donald Trump runs on, is the idea, and this is where he is actually fighting a small fracture in his constituencies, is that he put it back to the states. That was the whole point, was not that he created an abortion ban, was that he said, we're going to let the states decide. So he is able to wash his hands of the whole idea that he had an abortion ban because he's leaving that up to the states to decide if they want it or not.
I got rid of Roe v. Wade. I'm the one that got rid of Roe v. Wade. I was able to do it, and I was very honored to do it.
Do you believe in punishment for abortion? Yes or no, as a principle?
The answer is that there has to be some form of punishment.
For the woman?
Yeah, there has to be some form. There, of course, remains a vital role for the federal government in protecting unborn life.
Nobody has ever done more for right to life than Donald Trump. Roe v. Wade, they won. They finally won.
The Iowa bill was signed, and they wouldn't have been able to do anything if I wasn't able to do what I did.
And that was not a fatal blow to our democracy.
It was not. But it was a hard blow to our democracy.
It was the first time that rights have been taken away from an American.
Right. And so here is where doomsday, here's where I see the downfall of democracy happening. And it's going to happen on the judicial branch side. So in our Oregon Constitution, it's very cool. We have it cauterized into our Constitution that we will not deport anybody that has an abortion. There are states out there that say that they will prosecute a woman who goes and has an abortion in another state. And so if a girl comes to the Oregon and they have an abortion in Idaho, says, well, you got to extradite that girl to be prosecuted here in Idaho, we can say, well, no, we're not going to do that. And then they'll take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will say, well, Idaho has jurisdiction over that girl because they committed a crime under their thing and they're a resident of Idaho, so you have to. And then
will do that.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then Oregon will say, well, F that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to let you take this poor girl back. And then slowly states are going to defy the Supreme Court, and it'll slowly fracture. It's going to be real slow, but it's going to happen. Maybe.
The fatal blow to our democracy was when they decided to give a president like Donald Trump immunity. Official acts.
Well, and that's the thing. So what does it constitute an official act? If he calls his Secretary of State and wants them to look into something that has to do with his campaign, and he might say, well, it's an official act because it's about the national security of the United States. I have to have a clean campaign in order to be reelected. Otherwise, we lose and it goes to the Democrats. And so who decides what an official act is? And
to follow up on that, he could have the Department of Treasury go after his opponent and have the IRS go after him.
Sure. You can have the IRS look into things and look into his opponent, and because it's an official act.
He can withhold funds from Medicaid. And
so not yet.
Like that. Oh, wait.
So that's the thing. You're right.
Yes.
I was going to say not yet, but it was going through, and I think it got through where the president. I'm not sure if this passed, but I know that it is part of our Project 2025. Was to change the law so that the president has the power to suspend the funding if he so desires. Because a lot of times, like one of the things that happens is when a president comes into office, a lot of things are already set in motion by the previous administration. So when Joe Biden came into office and they talk about all the border stuff, a lot of that stuff was already set up by the Trump administration. And so what he did was he tried to move the money around as best he could in order to get the job done in a more efficient way or more humane way. But he couldn't stop a lot of those things that were happening. He couldn't stop the wall from being built because the money had already been allocated and it was already in motion. Now, the Project 2025 idea would say that the president can stop that. The president can hold that funding up and choose when to release it, basically.
Well, it's all under the Department of Treasury.
Yeah, it takes away the power of the purse from Congress.
And since Trump could appoint people in the Treasury, it would be a Trump-compliant department that would simply stop sending the Department of Education funding, which would prevent issuance of new federally backed student loans for college. And like I mentioned, the IRS, you could use the IRS as a political weapon. And other than Medicare and Medicaid, HUD and the EPA would also be abused by him. Full immunity.
Speaking of full immunity,
I really did not expect that they would do this. And they, Donald Trump and his counsel asked for this 100% absolute immunity thing, which was insane. I would say they got 105% of what they were asking for. They got immunity from this court, despite some of the language in Justice Roberts' the ruling saying that there was some measure of humility here, some measure of restraint. The practical impact of what they have done is to give Trump immunity that even he and his counsel did not ask for. And given that the hypotheticals over the course of these arguments, as you rightly pointed out, included things like, can the president assassinate a rival? I think we have to look at the Supreme Court's affirmative answer to that. Yes, you can. With as much seriousness as it deserves. I mean, this is a death squad ruling. This is a ruling that says that as long as you can construe it as an official or quasi-official act, you can do absolutely anything, and never be held accountable, not only while you are president, but forever.
The Supreme Court also made a ruling stating that they can take gratuities now. After official acts.
Oh, my God.
Oh, that's Trigger Rictor.
Oh, my God.
Accidental trigger. Right? Isn't that insane? And for those of you who don't understand what that is, so basically what it means is if the Supreme Court rules in favor of you, you can give them gifts of any type as long as it's after they ruled in your favor. So if you are notorious for giving gratuities for favorable rulings, a judge might be inclined.
Do you know what this would fall under?
Bribes.
The Department of State, the Constitution's emoluments. How do you say it? Right there. How do you say that word? Emoluments.
Emoluments? I have no idea. The emoluments clause.
Here we are. We're teachers.
We are. I'm not an English teacher. I'm a social studies teacher, which I should know this word.
What is an emoluments clause?
That was butchered like a pig.
How a single line of the U.S. Constitution guards against improper foreign influence on federal emoluments clause. Okay, let's practice that again. Emoluments. Okay. So, Tim, do you know this falls under the Department of State? Department of State.
There you go.
Yeah, the Constitution's emoluments clause requires that the president to refrain from accepting any gift. Are you listening, Clarence Thomas? Payment or anything of value from a foreign state or its rulers. Now he can. Hey, you want nuclear secrets, Iran? Pay me.
Sure.
Everything's for sale.
Everything's for sale. God. Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy we live in this world where our politicians are just out in the open with it too?
So
like Clarence Thomas, like it drives me nuts. Like he's like, well, I'm the Supreme Court justice, so I'm just going to allow people to fly me wherever they want. If they, it's just it's open.
Yep,
it's open bull.
I rise today to introduce articles of impeachment against Associate Justices of the Supreme Court Clarence Thomas and Samuel Anthony Alito Jr. Nomination and appointment to the Supreme Court is one of the highest privileges and most consequential responsibilities of our nation. Such an appointment is uniquely insulated in its power. Confirmation to the court is a lifetime appointment whereby justices are entrusted with decisions that powerfully shape the nation as well as the lives of every American. Reasonable Americans will and do believe that Justices Thomas and Alito are prone and subject to corruption, that the institution failing to punish them is broken, and that consequently their impeachment is a constitutional imperative and our congressional duty.
The whole idea of our country becoming the United States of America was to get away from the King of England. Now they're giving the power to the president to become the King of America. And the hand of the king is the Supreme Court. So like say right now, if Biden wanted to assassinate and use SEAL Team 6 to take out somebody, the Supreme Court could say, no. But if Trump were to do it, they could say, yes.
They could.
It was something to read today, both the decision and the dissent. And I guess the sort of best way for me to kind of sum it up is, I don't know if everyone here watches Game of Thrones, but if you're a Game of Thrones fan, you will note that in Westeros there is a king, and then there is the hand of the king. And when the king is very young or very old or very mad, the hand of the king is effectively the king. And what I think you saw in this ruling today was the Supreme Court declare their preferred president, of course, because they know no Democrat would exercise these powers.
Well, it comes up to them to decide if it's an official act, right? And so,
and it's a conservative-leaning, highly tipped court.
Yeah.
It is the most conservative-leaning court in United States history.
Right. So what would happen is, and so for those of you who don't understand how the courts work, there are 13 circuit district courts of appeals. And the way it works is you take a case to the court in your district, and then that judge will rule, and it will go up to the Court of Appeals, which is like the tier next, which will decide if that judge did everything right to rule in that favor. And if yes, then it can go up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court can rule again. Or if no, it can go up to the Supreme Court and they can overturn that. So it's like just a ladder up there, fishing up there. So,
Tim, paint the picture. How a president could attempt to abuse his power, and then how the Supreme Court could give him the power or refrain him.
Right. So if we talk about some crazy court stuff that's happened, we want to talk about like the abortion issue. Where did that come from? That came from I think it was like the Fifth Circuit Court, or something along those lines. And that was brought to the court, and it was ruled that I believe it was the mifepristone. If I'm talking about the abortion pill at this point. So a state ruled that it was illegal, basically, because it needed to be more researched, even though it was the most researched drug ever. That went up to the Court of Appeals there, because what that did was it blanket statement, and it basically made precedent over the entire United States, which is crazy. And so it goes up to the Court of Appeals, and another court or another state in a different district could then sue and take that to the Supreme Court to say basically, no, you can't spread that ruling over all of the United States. And the Supreme Court actually struck that down and said, no, we're not going to allow one state to bring one case to decide whether or not this abortion pill drug can be legal in the United States. But what it did with Roe versus Wade was it said, look, a state came up and ruled that they want their abortion laws to be theirs. We want to kick that back onto the state. And the Supreme Court said, okay, great. We're going to scratch Roe versus Wade and let all the states decide how their abortion laws are. It's no longer the Supreme Court protect. Well, okay, so so Roe versus Wade protected a woman's right to what?
Body autonomy.
There you go. Right. So it was a protection for women. It wasn't a protection for abortion.
The Supreme Court's very dangerous right now.
It is. And the way it's operated is that there are some ladders to the Supreme Court that are stacked, allowing them to fast track things like that case with the graphic designer, right? Let's get that through the court system as fast as we can, and you can fast track it through the Court of Appeals and up to the Supreme Court if it is something that has like dire consequences, which in the eyes of the conservatives, it did, and in the eyes of the conservative courts that they had stacked, it was.
And of course, Clarence Thomas has already made it clear that he's going to be targeting gay marriage next.
Yeah.
More rights are going to be taken away. In the name of Jesus. Can I get an amen?
We're here in New York City asking people their thoughts on abortion.
Do you know who you're interviewing?
Sorry, no. Please do tell
I'm
me.
Alexander Sanger. I'm the former president of Planned Parenthood of New York. My grandmother is Margaret Sanger, who founded Planned Parenthood. You cannot make abortion go away by criminalizing it.
Mm-hmm.
All you do is you make it unsafe. You put women at risk, poor women, women of color, women that don't have the advantages of middle class, wealthy women to travel somewhere and get an abortion. It's discriminatory, it's unfair, it's unsafe, and to me it's just a total outrage against women.
It's a woman's choice.
Yes.
There's one thing that this ruling with the Supreme Court has interfered with other judicial work is Jack Smith.
Right. So you have, and whether or not you believe Judge Eileen Cannon is an agent of Donald Trump.
Yes, she is.
Right. Well, okay. So she's very much ruled in favor of him often. And Donald Trump's modus operandi when it comes to using the courts is to delay. And she has allowed that to happen.
Well, she's throwing out the documents.
Yeah, she's throwing, which is sure, whatever. At the end of the day, I mean, he broke the law in New York. We know that. He's a criminal.
Convicted felon.
Yeah, and people go to jail for the crimes that he does. But that being aside, I think it comes back down to the election in democracy. The people want him. Well, no, I'm not going to say everybody wants him. Some people want him. Let him go. Let him run. Let us decide. Let the people decide at this point. Right? This is America, right? We want to vote. We know who he is. We know the criminal of Donald Trump. We know that he is the kind of person that will walk up to a girl and grab her by the pussy. It is his personality. So if that's the America we want, we should be allowed to choose that. Which is kind of sad. It's idiocracy. We're all wearing Crocs.
So we all have to wait till after the election to see if any of these trials happen.
Sure. And again, it's that delay tactic. And hopefully, honestly, by the time that we get there, it'll be irrelevant is what really is going to come down to. I think they'll go through and they'll do it. And, it's going to cost Donald Trump a boatload of money. And as long as his constituents are paying him, whatever.
Well,
it's their money they want to burn.
He's been recently bragging that Elon Musk has been giving him millions of dollars.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Coming back down to our bajillionaires using their money for the betterment of humanity. Like, what? Why?
Trump bragging about how Elon Musk is going to be giving him $45 million a month, and therefore he has to make life good for Elon.
We have to make life good for our smart people, We have some smart people. We have to make life good for our smart people. And he's as smart as you get. But Elon endorsed me the other day, and I didn't even know this. He didn't even tell me about it. But he gives me $45 million a month.
He's telling you what he's going to do. He's going to make life good for people like Elon Musk, who happens to already be the richest person in the world. Basically, the campaign in its entirety.
1 hour later.
Elon Musk just backed out of his $45 million a month pledge to Donald Trump's campaign, telling Fortune magazine that he, quote, doesn't subscribe to a cult of personality.
So just within the last moment, we saw that Elon Musk is no longer going to be giving the Trump administration $45 million a month.
Isn't that crazy? $45 million.
Well, what's crazy is that we live in a world where you can do that in politics. You can give a campaign $45 million a month if you wanted to. You can buy it if you want.
Yep, there's no more regulation with that.
Citizens United. Sounded really good. Had a good ring to it. Citizens United. Build some schools, Elon. Jesus.
Yeah, we've talked about him in depth as well.
We have. And so there we are. We are at a point where our court systems have kind of been stacked in the conservative side.
I wonder what our founding fathers would think about our Supreme Court right now by giving the president such complete control and power and making the president become king.
I don't think they would like it. I think they would like the idea that they are still trying to maintain this. Because here's the thing. The United States was not necessarily designed to be socialist. It wasn't. Definitely was not. It was designed to be capitalist, right? It was designed so that the people have power, but not so much power that they can regulate, the people who make the money. Right. But also at the same time, you don't want the people who make the money to have so much power that they take advantage of the people. So there's a balance between like the rights of the people versus the rights of your pocket. Money is speech.
Right.
America.
The liberal justice. I can't talk.
Justice Sotomayor.
Justice Sotomayor wrote the dissent in regards to Trump becoming king. She wrote, "In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law."
Here's the thing that I have learned. When she was writing the dissent, yes, it seemed extreme, but that's necessary because remember when Trump was coming into office, he talked about, everybody's talking about Roe versus Wade and are you going to overturn it, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no, it's for the courts to decide, blah, blah. But the power was there. And what we know about the Republicans is if they have the power to do it, to push their agenda, they're gonna push their agenda.
No question.
I mean, look at what they did with the Supreme Court in terms of Obama, right? Just before the end of his term.
Thank you, Mitch McConnell.
Right. Let's stop him from putting a Supreme Court. If I have the ability to do it, I'm going to do it.
Barack's stupid.
Right. And then let's do the same thing when Trump is in office. Let's fast track these guys through and get them in there as soon as we can so that and it's just it's a game. And the problem is that you have one side who wants to play by one rule and one side that wants to play by the other rules. Now, I'm not going to say Democrats play by the rules every time because they definitely don't. Both sides break the rules, and it's frustrating when both sides do it.
What are your thoughts on this? I'm calling it Trump's Supreme Court because that's really what it is. Trump's Supreme Court is now roughly the equivalent to the enabling acts of Nazi Germany, coupled with the power of pardon, which allows the president to immunize anyone he or she chooses from federal prosecution without review or challenge from the other branches of government. The president can instruct subordinates of his or her choosing to act without regard for legal consequences. Vladimir Putin.
So what that means is that let's go back to why they're not allowed to do that. Do you guys remember, for those of you who are history buffs, in World War II, the United States did something that was awful. Do you know what they did at home that was awful?
There's a lot of things I'm sure we did that were awful.
Right, but what was like the major thing that it kind of goes untalked
The internment
about?
camps.
The internment camps. We think about the Jews in the Nazi internment camps. We had our own internment camps.
Yeah, the poor Japanese.
Right, the poor Japanese or Asian Americans. I'm sure they threw anybody who looked Japanese in those things. And that's the thing that sucked, right? So basically what it means is Donald Trump can say, hey, I want you guys to, I want my ICE to go out and I want you guys to just snatch up all the illegal Mexicans. And whether or not you think they're illegal or not, if they don't have identification on, you can just assume that they are illegals and throw them in the pen. And we can hold them for, so they'll probably use something along the lines of administrative detention, right? We'll hold them for national security's sake, and then we'll deport them, right? And he gives Donald Trump the ability to do that without consequence and without any checks or balances. which is really kind of scary. And we're looking at that whole the Japanese internment camps. If you don't know, the United States during World War II were so scared of the Japanese and being attacked by Japanese Americans here at home that they just riled up every Japanese American and threw them in an internment camp. And these were not nice places. These were crap. We're not talking like shacks, no electricity, no running water, blankets, no nothing. It was just crap. It's a black eye on America's history, and one that we need to talk about a little bit more, I think. But now we can repeat our history, and Donald Trump can do it with no consequence if he gets the nomination. Now that brings us to our president.
President Harris?
Soon to be, maybe. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe.
So how do we fix this problem with this rogue court?
How do we fix this problem with this rogue court? Well, we kind of got to just wait it out at this point. I mean,
why can't we stack the court?
Because that's...
I would fix it.
It would fix it.
Democrat Congress, Democrat Senate.
We could stack the court. It's been done in the past is the thing. Do you remember when the court was stacked last?
No.
So the size of the court was last changed in 1869 when it was set at 9. It's changed a few times, but it's been at 9 since 1869. So it's
time for a change.
Maybe. But at the same time, do you increase it? I think we should just reduce it.
Or impeach.
No.
It's happened before.
Okay. But that's a whole process, and impeaching someone again is... So
that's our two options. What would you do?
What would you impeach them for?
Well, look at Clarence Thomas accepting gifts from Russia.
It's okay.
For being biased. He's supposed to be unbiased, but he's biased. Flying flags upside down and stuff and during the insurrection.
He is what he is. And we elected Donald Trump. He was appointed by whoever he was appointed by. Like, at the end of the day, we've made our bed. We need to lie in it. Right? We can't go say, okay, we can just, because what it does is that is the slippery slope argument. It would just lead to us saying, well, let's see what other officials we can start to impeach and whatnot. And it would just be a cascading thing. It's already begun.
There's a third option for you.
Okay.
So you don't like the idea of stacking the court. You don't like the idea of impeaching the son of a bitch.
Sure.
Codifying law. Democrats could have codified.
Oh, sure. There's
Roe
another.
versus Wade.
There's
They could
checks and
codify.
balances. So at the end of the day, the reason why it went back down to the courts is because they didn't like how it was written. So Congress can go back and they can write a law protecting women's right to choose.
And if we have a Democrat Congress,
maybe we can do that.
We can make Roe versus Wade law of the land if we have. Now, I have to be clear. We got to have a majority in the House, skinny majority. We can take a really skinny majority in the Senate. I'll take 50 and a Democrat in the White House. We have those three things. We will suspend the filibuster. We have the votes for that on Roe versus Wade. First vote Democrats will take in the Senate, first substantive vote, is to make Roe versus Wade law of the land again in America.
That's news. That's newsy.
So those are our three options, really.
Sure. Or we live in a state where we make sure we have those protections in our Constitution, which we do in Oregon.
So no American is actually created equal then?
No, absolutely not.
So that's a fundamental problem. We're no longer the United States.
Well, we are the United States. You just have to look at all the perspectives and understand which perspectives we want to use to mold our country.
And thanks to Christian nationalism and this rogue court, a woman has more rights in this state than, let's say, in Texas.
Absolutely. That is true.
Disgusting. And if President Harris becomes the next president, our own president would have less rights in certain states than others.
Our own president?
Profound. Harris.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. If she were to get pregnant.
Well, she wouldn't, but just being a woman in general, she would have less rights.
Sure.
She would not have body autonomy.
Well, and we also have to remember it wasn't that long ago that women got the right to vote.
And there are some people in that Project 2025 that don't want women to continue to vote.
Well, it goes back to what it was at the beginning. A lot of people want it to be white. Or no, let me back. It doesn't have to be white. I guess you could say it has to be landowners.
Right, and they want to go back to that as well.
Right, and if you think about that
for voting,
for voting wise, well, then what does that would it count if you live in an apartment? Would you get to vote, Rick?
I would not, but you would.
You know, back in the day, colonial period, you had to be a landowner, a property owner to be eligible to vote, and I don't think that's a bad idea. And the reason was very simple. If somebody owns property in a community, they're vested in that community. If they're renters, they're going to be up and gone. Well, they could leave the next day. They have no tie to the community. They've got no long-term investment in the community. But somebody that owns property, he cares about the public policies that manage that community because it's going to affect his property. It's going to affect the use of his property. It's going to affect the value of his property. It's going to affect what he's able to do with his property. It's going to affect his family who lives on that property. He's vested.
This is morally wrong. If my landlord can't even take care of their property, how can I expect them to make the right decisions for me? I am not their child. I am not their liability. They are not my master. This white entitlement is going too far.
I gave you 3 options. I need you to pick one. Stacking the court, impeaching, or codifying. Which one would
Codifying.
you? And we're doing rank voting now, so codifying's 1.
Codifying's 1. The other 2 are extreme, and I don't think it should be used.
I say stack the court. Yes.
Because then you set a precedent for the next administration that gets there. If they don't like the way the court's stacked, they can stack it again.
Okay. It's worth a gamble.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
That if Donald Trump becomes president, Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas will immediately retire. They're both in their 70s. They want to retire under a Republican. We now know they are naked partisans. They're not jurists by any stretch of the imagination. They will retire, and Donald Trump will replace them with 30-something and 40-something-year-old versions of themselves, meaning Donald Trump will have appointed at that point 5 out of 9 members of the United States Supreme Court. He will have created a court that will last for 50 years or more. That is the legacy he will then inherit as somebody who did not win the popular vote the first time, who got a stolen court seat that he was allowed to flip after Justice Ginsburg died. This is insanity that people are even considering doing it.
And now it's time to Let's Quiz Tim.
Oh, yeah? Is that what we're doing? We're going to Let's Quiz Tim.
Ready?
Sounds gross.
Tim.
Rick.
Has a Supreme Court justice ever been impeached?
I want to say yes.
Correct. The only justice to be impeached was Associate Justice Samuel Chase in 1805.
And what was that for?
He was misusing the internet in the Supreme Court chambers.
Oh, yeah? He was looking at something he shouldn't have?
In 1805.
In 1805?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's cool. So you have no idea? Okay.
Justice Brett Kavanaugh was accused of rape by a psychology professor in 2019. What was her name?
Oh, I don't know her name. I forget her name, but I know the story.
Christine
Pitwanich.
Blasey.
That's, I think, a local weather newscaster.
Christine Blasey Ford.
Okay, cool.
What job qualifications does the Constitution require of Supreme Court nominees?
Ooh, I want to say something along the lines of it's something weird. It's age 37, maybe 35. No, that's the president.
You just got to be a lawyer.
That's it. You just have to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is going to be a hard one for you.
Okay.
How long can a Supreme Court justice serve for?
It's a lifetime appointment.
Yeah. Out of more than 7,000 cases.
Do you know why it's a lifetime appointment?
No.
I think the initial reason was to prevent them from taking bribes and having election interests.
We could also set term limits too. That could be the 4th option to what I was presenting to you. Codifying, impeaching, stacking, or
so the question then would be, if you had the term limit, if you make them eligible to run again, then it makes them susceptible to campaign bribes and whatnot. Or is it something where we just say, here's your 8 years of a term limit, or
there you go,
12 years or something along those lines, something that works? I don't know. It's a good question. That could work.
Out of more than 7,000 cases the court is asked to hear each term, how many are they able to hear?
The Supreme Court?
Yes.
I want to say somewhere along the lines of like 250. 100. 100? That's it. Wow.
What do the justices do primarily when they're with their time when they are not on the bench?
They travel. They go on yachts. They fly on private jets. They visit Russia.
Well, they're supposed to be writing opinions.
Oh, yeah? Clarence Thomas?
You
got an opinion on that?
God. What is an independent judiciary? What does that mean?
An independent judiciary?
Yeah.
It would be like, I believe it's like a separate operation that doesn't fall within the ranks of the like circuit court, court of appeals, Supreme Court.
Judges are not influenced by opinion polls or protest marches. Judges are not influenced by media reports. Judges do not ask the president or members of Congress how the court should decide cases. And the Supreme Court is supposed to do all of that.
And this is, what was this question?
What's an independent judiciary? Because that's what they are.
Oh, I totally got it wrong.
That's okay.
100%. That's embarrassing because I should know because I am a social studies teacher. So an independent judiciary just means that they are impartial.
Thank you, but they are partial, so that's where we're at.
Oh, yeah. Let's fly a flag upside down a few times.
Catastrophic problem. Who are the current...
I sound like an idiot.
Who are the current Supreme Court justices?
Oh, my God. There's 9 of them, so...
Who is the Chief Justice?
John Roberts.
Yep.
Then there's Alito.
And Clarence.
And Clarence Thomas. Then there's LaToya Jackson.
That's racist.
Is it? Did I get it wrong?
Yes. Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Why did I say LaToya? I don't know. Ketanji Brown Jackson. Yeah, I'm terrible with them. So let me go back to this. Let's go with the conservative ones first because those are the easy ones. You've got Kavanaugh. You've got Comey Barrett. You've got Gorsuch, Alito, and Roberts. Mm-hmm. And those are the conservative. And then we have Jackson. We've got
Sotomayor. The other woman. Elena Kagan.
Yeah, that's right. Elena Kagan. You don't hear the names of the regular judges or the left-leaning justices often because they don't say many controversial things.
And they're doing their job.
They're doing their job by being impartial.
The fundamental question I think we need to ask people that are listening to this and watching this is court reform possible? We talked about impeaching. We talked about stacking. We talked about term limits. We talked about codifying. Is the Supreme Court reform is going to be a hot button issue.
And of those choices you gave me, only one of them follows like a standard procedure that it should, and that's the codifying. Because there is a way that we can do this that doesn't call into question the integrity of the Supreme Court, even though its integrity is being called into question.
We can make Roe versus Wade law of the land if we have, now I have to be clear, we got to have a majority in the House, skinny majority. We can take a really skinny majority in the Senate. I'll take 50 and a Democrat in the White House. We have those 3 things. We will suspend the filibuster. We have the votes for that on Roe versus Wade. First vote Democrats will take in the Senate, first substantive vote, is to make Roe versus Wade law of the land again in America.
That's news. That's newsy.
And that's the problem is that if we were to then go down those other 2 roads, expanding the courts or impeachment, it's calling into question the integrity of the courts. And that's a problem.
Now, speaking about codifying, how can this happen? How can women's rights return back to normal for all Americans? Congress would need to pass a law that would provide the same protections Roe did. So a law that says women have a right to abortion without excessive government restrictions is the only way to go.
Yeah.
And what will lean into that are our United States military, women that are in the military.
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm. So what the Supreme Court is supposed to do is that they're hearing cases that challenge the Constitution.
Yes, that's what they do.
Interpret legislation. Mm-hmm. They protect civil rights allegedly, deals with disputes between states and presides over cases that involve treaties. One of the most important powers of the Supreme Court is judicial review. The court's task is to interpret the meaning of a law, to decide whether a law is relevant to a particular set of facts, or to rule on how a law should be applied.
Right. So if we were to codify Roe versus Wade in through the Congress, the judiciary, then the Supreme Court, could then hear a state's case saying that is unconstitutional. So it could go full circle.
Great.
Yeah.
So that's why we need to impeach or stack the court.
Bend the rules. But at the same time, that's kind of what politics is all about. Can you bend the rules enough? But the problem is when you bend things, things break, and we have a very fragile democracy. My trigger for you, Richter, is the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas is got his sights set on gay rights. And I recently went to a pride parade.
He went to gay pride.
I did. It was interesting.
Go. Ugh, queers. Ugh.
Yeah, it was.
Ew.
Well, and the thing about pride is that, and this is the trigger, Rick, Trigger Rictor, gay pride has become over commercialized.
I never thought you would ever go.
Why not?
Because you told me.
So what I said was, I don't like the idea of having like people be overtly sexual in front of my children.
And that's what happened.
And that's what happens. That's, well, yeah. and I knew that was going to happen. And there's more to the story that I don't need to share. But at the end of the day, I took my kids to Pride. And
that's very progressive.
It was. And there was a lot of, so let's go back to Pride. It hasn't been commercialized, Rick.
Oh, it's commercialized. There you go. Now you found the trigger.
Right. See,
now you found it.
I said it earlier.
He was digging around and then he pulled out a little nugget and here we go.
I led with
my
that.
God. Yes, gay pride is so commercial. It's a double-edged sword. I am thankful.
Proof that Rick doesn't pay attention to me.
I do listen.
Sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Selectively.
Except your bad jokes. I don't catch those.
Sure.
But yeah, you're going to see Citibank and then you're going to see, Arby's and all these companies coming down with their floats. And it's like, where are the gays at?
So that's the thing. It started off and it had, that is what it was. It was everybody had their banner that they had at the front, and then all their employees or whoever is marching with them marching. And it was a lot of swag, and it was a lot of it wasn't impressive. It was boring to me, to be honest with you. There were probably maybe 8 groups, maybe 10 out of the entire thing that were actual, like if you just put all those together, you'd have a great pride flag or pride parade. It took out all the commercial stuff. And I wish they would have, instead of sprinkling them in there, either done them at the beginning or at the end so you could time it so you didn't have to watch the whole damn thing because it was long. It was like 2 hours of a parade. And it didn't need to be that long.
The LGBTQIA plus community is getting bigger and bigger with other acronyms. I'm guessing.
Sure.
Being added.
LGBTQ
plus,
IA2S plus, or 2S goes somewhere in there,
and it's getting messy. It is. And we've talked about this before on the podcast, and there's an argument that LGB should be taken away from the TQIA R2D2 because it's just being so big. It is.
Okay.
Because what it originally was back in the 80s and 90s is not what it is now.
Okay.
Back then, and I remember going to Pride back then, it was a fight for survival to have some kind of a political foot with people and they're suffering and getting the funds for AIDS treatment.
So let's go back to that setting. What was happening at the time when Pride came about?
Well, there was no gay rights.
There was no gay rights. So,
and police were raiding, like Stonewall. Police were busting gays and lesbians.
Right. So they were being
safe places.
Right. So they were being discriminated against in terms of
their
the
rights
police,
were being violated.
Right? So they were
being targeted.
So they would raid a place for what purpose? Like drugs or whatever?
No, for just sexual indecency.
Okay. There you go. So they would raid
deviants.
Raid places for people just being gay.
Remember, giving head was illegal.
Right. Sodomy is illegal.
Oh, the correct term.
Right.
It's
illegal.
Like sodomy.
Exactly right.
Hey,
so
you want some head?
So the only way And on top of that, the AIDS epidemic was
killing
everybody.
And no one cared.
Well, and it wasn't just they didn't care. I do believe it was openly stated that we'll just let the AIDS epidemic take care of the gay community. We'll just let them.
Thank you, Ronald Reagan.
Right, exactly. So,
but then Nancy's hairdressers were all dying on her, and she's like, "Oh my God, who's going to do my hair?"
That's true. And so the only way that the gay community could get their voice out there, get recognition, is by putting it in your face. And that's what gay pride was all about. Now, it was very much in our face, but it was only a few floats. Now it's, look at us, we stand with the gays.
And I'm thankful for that. Yay.
Sure. But have a booth somewhere. You don't have to march in the parade.
But if you're going to be supportive in regards to inclusion with your LGBTQIA employees and guests or customers, don't make it just at the month of June. Be year round.
Sure, exactly.
Because then things go back to normal come July. But
we're not saying that you have to change your logo and make it rainbow year round, but have at least some sort of initiative, somewhere on your website that shows your devotion to the community.
Yeah. I was talking with Tim recently. I think the focus on pride should continue as a celebration, because that's what it's turned into now, is a celebration. Now watch, if the Supreme Court decides to take away gay marriage, and boom, pride will all of a sudden have a new invigorating, what's the word I'm looking for? Surge of energy and protest.
They'll have a new focus. They'll have a new mission. They'll have
So
whatever.
Let's say that doesn't happen. I think we should have a women's rights pride, where women coming together and men supporting women in regards to what's happened with Roe versus Wade.
No need for the tits.
Well, some men will disagree and some women will disagree.
Maybe.
Boobs.
That's true. There was a lot of that.
Yeah. But June is also Women's Rights Month.
Sure.
But if more women continue to die and are imprisoned for
right,
well,
already there are women out there who suffer from like an ectopic pregnancy, and the rules in those states are you have that baby.
Yeah, or that minor,
right?
That girl.
Even if it kills you, you have that baby, and then once that baby comes out, then we can try to save your life. But until that baby is born, even if that baby is not even growing inside your womb, you have that baby. That baby needs life, whether or not it's going to live or not, whether or not it has a developed set of lungs, you have that baby.
As an older gay man,
you have that baby.
Who's been to Pride many times. I would much rather right now go to a women's rights type of pride. Right. Because that's really fundamentally important right now, because at this moment, gay men have more rights than women across the United States.
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
Who would have thought that would have happened? Oh
that's
my
crazy.
Gosh, that's so profound.
Right. And what we're talking about here is the right to choose what happens to your body if you get pregnant. That is the fundamental right that we're talking about here, because at the end of the day, like everything else is pretty much equal. People will talk about,
and people like that idiot J.D. Vance wants a national ban on abortion.
Yeah, so
there's that. It's all, everything leads to something with these people.
Right.
So that's what they want coming down.
But that's what we're talking about here. And it's got to be an issue that is going to be in the courts, because again, there's like women where it's in the life of the mother. In some of these states, it doesn't matter until we determine the life of the. What is this you're doing?
I've got something on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, then say something.
As radical as this current Supreme Court is, anything could happen. Yeah. Oh yeah, they gave the Dobbs decision to the states.
Well, and then they say, that nobody in their right mind is going to abuse it the way that you're saying. Well, that's the point of why it's been changed, is so that it can be abused to that point. And it's scary because we've seen the conservative side say in the past, "Oh, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that." Roe versus Wade is a decision that that is precedent, and then all of a sudden they get the opportunity, and it's bam, let's take it out. And so we got to be real careful with the power we give people, because people are going to abuse it, especially when they notice that they are starting to become the minority.
Well, I'm the next target.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm not even married yet.
No.
Can I please at least get married first before they take my right to get married?
You got to find the right man. Good luck. Oh.
Well, that's it for this podcast. Be sure to subscribe.
This was a sad, depressing ending.
Follow us. Comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube. Follow Tim here on Twitter, or what's it called? X?
Twatter.
Yeah, we still call it Twitter. Yeah. And our socials are right here.
There they are.
Yeah.
Ba-dump.
At Tim Breaks It Down, and
which I've never checked.
At Richter_Riolo. Yeah.
We're back, baby.
Yeah. All right. So the next topic we'll be discussing is President Biden.
Oh.
Those bragging about overturning Roe v. Wade have no clue about the power of women. But they found out when reproductive freedom was on the ballot. We won in 2022 and 2020, and we'll win again in 2024. If you, the American people, send me a Congress that supports the right to choose, I promise you, I'll restore Roe v. Wade as the law of the land again.
Sure.
I think history is going to be a lot more kinder to him than people currently are.
Sure.
You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab him by the pussy. Do anything.
Here is a behind-the-scenes clip.
Yeah, stack the court away. Stack the court. Something. And then make it illegal to take rights away. You cannot take rights. We can only grant rights. We can't take.
Well, that is in the Constitution. That's part of the thing, is that you cannot have a amendment or anything that takes away. It's one of the Bill of Rights, where you can't have your rights can't be impeded by the system.
This is like a behind the scenes. The cameras are still going. Our microphones are off, but those. There you go. See my shirt?
Damn,
look at that. Maybe you could wear this in the next one. Ew. Wait. All right. I gotta shut them up. What?